How did you integrate security into the current setup?
We would be also using intruder in order to figure out if we have any vulnerabilities.
What kind of alerts do you get in your day in day out?
Particular pod of a deployment is continuously restarting.
Blue-green deployment strategy.
Got assigned to learn any newer tools which I am not aware of, right? I would be setting some clearer. Namaste everyone, welcome back to the channel. Based on few subscribers' request for a second mock interview, and they have posted few questions as well. So we'll be doing a mock interview today. And we have a guest, Vamsi, with us. So without any further ado, let's start the video.
Good morning, Vijay. Hope you're doing well. Thank you for taking the time to join with us again today.
Good morning, Vamsi. Yep, I'm doing great. Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here.
So let's begin by having you tell us a bit more about you and what has brought you here today.
Yep. As you already know, right, I'm Vijay. I have been working as a Devops engineer. Coming to the tech stack, right, I have been majorly working on AWS and GCP as the cloud environments. In these cloud environments, I have been working on multiple services like EC2 instances, VPCs, auto-scaling groups, load balancers, public-private subnets, Route 53, S3 buckets, EKS cluster. Coming to the major DevOps tools and technologies, I have been majorly working on Jenkins as a CI/CD pipeline. I have been working with Ansible for the configuration management. I have been also working on Terraform as an infrastructure as a code tool. I have been working with Docker. I have written multiple Docker files, and we are hosting these Docker images inside the Kubernetes as well. Coming to the monitoring stack, right, I have been working on Prometheus stack for service monitoring and ELK stack for the log monitoring as well. I have been working with the Linux machines for the past 4.5 years, so I'm good at shell scripting too. So this is about me. And coming to why I'm here, right? So by going through the JD, I definitely think that this job suits me, and that was the reason for me being here.
Okay. Thank you for introducing yourself. Could you please elaborate more about your day in day out activities in your current role?
Yep. Our day in day out activities would be we are working in agile methodology. So usually our day would be starting with the daily stand up, where we would be discussing on what are all the things that we did yesterday, what are the things that we are going to do today, and if we have any blockers or not. And the daily activities would be ranging from writing and reviewing some code, having some meetings with the other stakeholders or else with the developers, such that we would be able to make the CI/CD pipelines in order to make the deployment process smoother. And we would be also setting up any monitoring setup that we have. If we have received any alerts, right, we'd be checking those things as well, along with the debugging process too. And we would be also writing some shell scripts in order to automate any tasks if we have. So these would be my day in day out activities.
Could you please explain about the end-to-end architecture of the project you're working in?
Yep, we are majorly working on Java web applications. We have the React app as a front end, and we have containerized all of our multiple backend services which we have, and we are managing these Docker containers with the help of Kubernetes as well. And we would be also using multiple AWS cloud native services like auto scaling groups, load balancers, and we would be using RDS along with S3 buckets as well for the data redundancy. And so this is the architecture which we have. Once we receive the request on the load balancer, this would be routing that particular request to the appropriate target group. And once the user interacts with the web interface, it would be calling multiple backend APIs with the private APIs, as these are all configured inside the same VPC. And as I said, right, we would be also using multiple database instances too.
How did you integrate security into the current setup?
Coming to the security, we have integrated the security inside the CA itself. So whenever the developer develops the code, we would be using static code analysis tools like SonarQube along with the tree scanning as well in order to figure out any vulnerabilities that we have inside the Docker containers. Along with these things, we would be also using intruder in order to figure out if we have any vulnerabilities inside the EC2 instances which we have, or else whatever the APIs that we are hosting to. And we'd be also having AWS Security Hub like the guard duty, which would be doing continuous threat analysis, and it would be notifying us if we have any malicious activity happening in the backend services which we have.
Okay. How did you enable the monitoring for your infrastructure as well as your application?
Yes, we have enabled the monitoring for our infrastructure as well as the application as well. Coming to the application services monitoring, right? We are using multiple exporters like JMX exporter in order to expose the matrices of a Java service, and we would be using black box exporter in order to monitor plain health endpoints. We would be using the same black box exporter in order to monitor any certificates or else get to know the certificate expiry. And for the infrastructure monitoring, right, we have deployed Node Exporter, and by using this Node Exporter, we will be pushing all the matrices to the Prometheus, and we would be storing all the matrices inside the Prometheus time series database. And by connecting this as a data source to the Grafana, right, we would be able to visualize all of the data. And coming to the logging, we are using ELK stack or else EFK stack. So we would be using Elasticsearch, FluentBit along with Kibana. So we have deployed FluentBit as a daemon set, which would be running as a replica in all of the worker nodes which we have, and it would be pushing all the logs from the worker nodes to the Elasticsearch. And we would be creating indices inside the Kibana. And once these index patterns are created, right, we would be able to visualize them again by creating the Kibana dashboards as well.
Okay. What kind of alerts do you get in your day in, day out?
Yep, we would be receiving multiple alerts like, let's say the certificate is going to expire, let's say the CPU is spiking up, or else the memory is spiking up, or else a particular pod of a deployment is continuously restarting. Uh, when there is an auto scaling, right? There are not enough resources that are available in the actual Kubernetes cluster itself. So these are all the different kinds of alerts which we would be getting, and we'd be getting also the application alerts like, let's say the error rates which we would be having, the latency which we are having. These are all the different kinds of alerts which we are monitoring.
How do you deal with them, and what kind of ticketing tool do you use?
Once we receive these alerts via the PagerDuty, we'd be going through the whatever the runbooks that we have, and we'd be trying to fix those issues by following those particular runbooks. And if these issues are newer to us, right, and we'd be trying to perform the RCA and figure out the root cause, and we'd be taking the same fix to the other environments as well. And we are using a ticketing tool called as ServiceNow, where we would be able to create multiple priority tickets like P1, P2, P3, and P4. Based on the SLAs which we have configured, these issues needs to be solved in a specific amount of time. Like the P1 should be solved in less than 4 hours. The P2 could be vary from 8 hours to a single day. The P3 could be varying from 2 days, and the P4 could be ranging to 4 or 5 business days as well.
Okay. Let's dive into a scenario. There is an S3 bucket which needs to be accessed by an EC2 instance. How do you achieve it?
Yeah, for suppose let's say if I want to connect an S3 bucket to an EC2 instance, right? I would be creating an IAM role, and I would be attaching multiple IAM policies to that, which would be granting the accesses in order to read and write the objects inside the S3 bucket. And I would be attaching this particular role to the EC2 instance such that I would be able to allow the S3 objects inside that particular EC2 instance as well. And there is one more way which I would be able to do. I would be able to again create the same IAM role, and I would be able to install the AWS CLI inside the EC2 instance, or else on any on-premises server as well. Once I have configured this AWS CLI, I should be able to write, read on the objects in the S3 bucket based on the permissions which I have been assigned to. So this is how I would be able to access an S3 bucket from an EC2 instance.
Please brief us about the deployment strategies you use for your application.
Yep. Coming to the different deployment strategies which we are using, right? We are using rolling upgrade, and we are also using blue-green deployment strategy depending on the requirement which we have.
Please brief us about blue-green deployment strategy.
Coming to the blue-green deployment, right? We would be using the blue-green deployment strategy if there are any critical deployments that we should be doing. We are using the rolling upgrade in order to do, or else in order to make any minor releases. Let's say if you want to upgrade the entire Kubernetes cluster from one version to the other version, right? We would be doing this in a a blue-green environment where we have already the current environment as blue, and we would be creating a newer environment called as green. Once this particular environment is up and running with all the resources and tested properly, right, we would be routing all the traffic to this particular green newly created environment by switching the traffic inside the route 53, and we would be using the older blue environment as the staging setup.
Please list and explain Docker instructions.
Yep, there are multiple Docker instructions that are there, and few of them are the from is the first Docker instruction which I would be using in order to use any base image. I would be using instructions like arguments in order to pass any variables. I would be using instructions like add and copy in order to copy or else add any content to the Docker container. I would be using expose in order to expose a particular port to the outside world from the Docker container. And I would be also using commands like cmd and entry point, which are Docker runtime instructions, which would be starting off a particular service once the Docker container spins up. So these are the few Docker instructions which I know.
How do you upgrade your Kubernetes cluster?
Yep. Let's say if you want to upgrade the Kubernetes environment, right? We should be upgrading the Kubernetes environment in a chronological order. Let's say if we have the 1.24 and if you want to upgrade to 1.28, we would be going from 1.24 to 2.5, 2.5 to 2.6, and the same way to 2.8. And while we are upgrading to one version to the other version, right, we would be checking if there are any deprecations that are there. If there are any plugin deprecations that have happened, we should be upgrading the required plugins along with the Kubernetes cluster too. And by modifying all of the deprecations and adding the latest values in the Kubernetes manifest files.
Okay, let's dive into another scenario. You have triggered a deployment, but it's not coming up. How do you debug this?
Yep. Let's say I have triggered a deployment and the pods are not coming up, right? I would be checking the logs of that particular pod by using kubectl logs-f, and I try to stream the logs and figure out if there are any issues in the logs. And I would be also checking the events of that particular deployment by using kubectl get events of that particular deployment. By going through this, right, I'd be able to know if there are any resource crunch that is happening inside the worker nodes, and if I should be adding any newer worker nodes as well. And we would be configuring the cluster autoscaler along with the HPA. So whenever there is load coming onto these deployments, right, we would be autoscaling the underlying worker nodes as well along with the deployments.
What is image pull policy in Kubernetes? And what kind of policies do we have?
Yep. By using the image pull policies, right, I would be able to let the particular deployment know when to pull the particular image while we are restarting or else deploying that particular deployment. And we would be having three values for the image pull policy: never, if not present, and always. The never would be not pulling that image never, and if not present would be pulling that image if that particular image is not present in the local, and always would be trying to pull that image always when we try to restart that particular deployment.
Let's say if you're assigned to learn a new things for the new integrations, what kind of approach do you follow to learn them quickly?
Yep. Let's say if I got assigned to learn any newer tools which I am not aware of, right, I would be setting some clearer learning goals in which I would be able to go through the official documentation and try to gather more information which I have. I would be trying to set up isolated environments where I can try all the POCs which I have, and I would be also using the communities and the forums in order to gain more knowledge, or else I would be asking for the answers if I have any questions too.
Thank you so much, Vijay, for sharing your time and insights with us today. Have a great day. Thank you so much.
Yep. Thank you very much for having me, and it's great talking to you. Yes, that's the interview. Hope you liked it. Please like, share, and comment.